Okay, today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about the respiratory system, and we're actually going to break this down into four separate parts. Today's video is all about the parts of the respiratory system and how they function. Okay, so it's going to be a relatively short video, hopefully. The next video then will be about gas exchange and basically how the gases are exchanged inside your lungs. The video after that will be about respiration and how your body uses oxygen and glucose to actually make energy. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about the effects of smoking. So there's going to be four separate videos. They're all going to be pretty short. Okay, so the notes shouldn't be too rough on this one. This is your respiratory system. It is broken into two separate categories. There's the upper respiratory tract, which contains your nose, your mouth, your nasal cavity, your pharynx, basically all the areas where the air comes into your respiratory system. And then you've got your lower respiratory tract that contains your lungs, your bronchioles, your bronchi, your alveoli, and basically all of the organs and parts that actually process the air. So the upper respiratory tract contains parts that bring the air in, and then the lower respiratory tract contains all the parts that kind of process the air. We're going to start with the upper respiratory tract. Here you have your nose and your mouth. The air comes in there. Inside of your nose, you have all kinds of hairs that actually help filter out the air. They take large particles of dust and dirt and bacteria out of the air and filter it into your nose. Then you also have basically sinuses, which create mucus, which help to filter out dust and debris and dirt. Then the air moves into this nasal cavity where it continues to be filtered, it warms, it moistens. It travels down your pharynx. This is the common area we talked about in the digestive system that has the food going down it, the liquid going down it, and basically all the air coming into it, so it's a kind of a common area. Then finally it moves down here where your epiglottis, your glottis ends up covering your windpipe when you're eating, which keeps food from going down into your windpipe. And again, we talked about that when we talked about the digestive system. The air, this is open when you're breathing, so the air will travel down into your windpipe, which is also called your trachea. It's the main airway that connects basically your mouth and your nose to your lungs. Then when you get to here, the trachea or windpipe breaks off into two separate branches. We call those bronchi. Okay, if you're talking about one of them, you call it a bronchus. If you're talking about both of them, they're called bronchi. Okay, one leads to your right lung, one leads to your left lung. And then those bronchi branch into even smaller branches called bronchioles. And finally, at the end of each bronchiole, you have a set of things called alveoli. They are basically air sacs, and that's where the gas exchange happens. Now, you also have some other things that help your lungs out with breathing and respiration. These white things here are your ribs, and they surround your lungs. They basically protect your lungs and your heart from being damaged. They're put there to protect them. Okay? And in between the ribs, you have these muscles. They're called intercostal muscles. And what they do is they help pull the ribs out and up so that the air can go into your lungs. Okay, so intercostal muscles. Then down here you have another very large muscle. It's called your diaphragm. And this muscle basically is a skeletal muscle. It pulls down, it contracts and pulls your lungs down when air comes into them and pushes the lungs up when you're pushing air out of your lungs. So this is your diaphragm. Now inside your lungs, guys, there's also itty bitty little hairs. They're called cilia, C-I-L-I-A, cilia. And those little itty bitty hairs help catch debris and foreign matter and bacteria and dust, and they push them up your trachea and up your bronchial tubes to get them out of your lungs. And then the inside of your lungs also make mucus. And this mucus helps again to catch foreign bacteria. It catches, dust and dirt. It catches bacteria and viruses and helps to push them out of your lungs using the cilia. That basically, guys, is your respiratory system. So again, let's take a little closer look. Your upper respiratory tract, again, you have your nose. Inside your nose are hairs that help catch foreign objects, dirt, bacteria, dust. Your sinuses make mucus, which help to catch foreign objects and keep them from going into your lungs. In here, the nasal cavity is where the air is warmed and moistened to make it easier on your lungs to process it. Then it goes down here into the pharynx. This is your glottis and your epiglottis, which basically cover over top of the windpipe when you're eating to keep the food from going into your windpipe. This right here, little tube, is your esophagus that the food actually goes down. This right here is your larynx, and it actually helps you to make sound when you're talking. So the air travels past that spot and helps you to make sound. And then finally, you've got your trachea that the air goes into, or your windpipe. So your upper respiratory tract is a passageway for respiration. It's where all your smell receptors are, so you're able to smell. Its main purpose is to filter incoming air of large materials, try to get it out of there before it goes into your lungs. It also moistens and warms the incoming air, and it actually passes air past your larynx, which allows you to actually speak. Here's your lower respiratory tract. Here's that larynx we were talking about where your speech comes from. Then the trachea down here, this is your windpipe. It basically branches off into your right and your left lung through the bronchus. Or guys, when we talk about one, we call it bronchus. When we talk about both, we call it bronchi. That ends up branching out into bronchioles, which are smaller little branches. And then finally, at the end of the bronchioles are the alveoli, which are the air sacs, which is actually where gas exchange occurs. So guys, basically your whole respiratory system from your lower respiratory system or your lower respiratory tract kind of looks like an upside down tree. The trunk would be your windpipe, the branches would be your bronchioles, and then basically your alveoli are the air sacs. They would be kind of like the leaves in a tree. But your alveoli are where the gas exchange happens. Then again, you've got your ribs that protect your lungs and your heart, your intercostal muscles in between that help to open up your lungs so you can breathe, and your diaphragm, which pulls down to open up your lungs so you can breathe. Oops, my bad. So again, the functions of your lower respiratory tract: your larynx helps open up your airway and produces sound. Your trachea, also known as your windpipe, transports air to and from your lungs. Your bronchi actually branch into your lungs. And then your alveoli are down there for gas exchange. So here's how it works when you breathe. Basically, you start at a relaxed state. Okay, everything's relaxed. When you breathe in, these intercostal muscles pull your rib cage out and up. And this diaphragm pulls down. It contracts and pulls your lungs down. When it pulls your ribs out and up and your lungs get pulled down, basically it allows them to open up, and it actually ends up creating a vacuum and kind of pulling air from your nose down into your lungs. So you can think of it like it's like it's pulling, and so it's pulling the air into your lungs. So basically when these pull out and this pulls down, it causes this suction. There we go. It's like suction. It causes this pulling like suction, and it suctions the air through your nose and down your windpipe and into your lungs. That's called inspiration. It's breathing in. Then when you breathe out, we call it expiration. The air exits your lungs. That's how I remember it. Inspiration, air comes in. Expiration, air goes out. It exits. When that happens, basically this diaphragm relaxes and pushes your lungs up. Your intercostal muscles relax and push your rib cage, or let your rib cage get pushed in. And all of that pushing pushes the carbon dioxide out of your lungs. It pushes it up your windpipe and out your nose. So here, all the pulling action pulls air into your lungs. All the pushing action over here pushes carbon dioxide out of your lungs and up your windpipe and out your nose. Oops. So inspiration is breathing in, expiration is breathing out. Everything starts off relaxed. During inspiration, your diaphragm contracts and pulls down. Your intercostal muscles between your ribs pull out and up. That expands the volume in your chest. When that expansion happens, the air pressure in your chest goes lower, and you end up pulling air from the outside. You pull air in through your nose and down your windpipe. Expiration is the opposite. It's when you breathe out, your muscles relax, those intercostal muscles relax. It pushes your rib cage in. Your diaphragm relaxes, which pushes your lungs up, and basically the air pressure increases inside your lungs because you're pushing everything together, and that air gets pushed out of your windpipe, or the carbon dioxide gets pushed out of your lungs, up your windpipe, and out your nose. Last thing here, what controls breathing? Well, there's two parts of your brain that control breathing. The first part is a higher level center in your brain that actually controls conscious thought. So if you're actually thinking about your breathing, like you're thinking about it, you can control your breathing using this part of your brain, the higher level part of your brain. So for instance, if I wanted to right now, I could start breathing much heavier. I can think about it. And when I think about it, this part of my brain up here is actually controlling the breathing. However, most of the time we don't think about our breathing, we just do it. Okay? When you're not really thinking about your breathing, when you just do breathing, that's this part down here that controls the breathing. It's in your brain stem, and there's a little sensor in there that senses how much carbon dioxide and how much oxygen is in your blood. And that little sensor, by sensing the levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide in your blood and in your brain fluid, it basically tells your lungs whether or not they should breathe faster or whether or not they should breathe slower. Okay? So this part is in your brainstem. You don't think about this part. This part just works all by itself. Whereas if you think about your breathing, it's controlled up here. This little part inside your brainstem is why a person can technically be brain dead. They can be in a vegetative state, okay, where they can't actually think anymore. They can't think, they can't cause themselves to move. They basically don't function like you or I do. They just basically lay in a bed in a vegetative state. And yet they can still continue breathing because the brainstem is what's controlling the breathing. Okay, so that's why you can hear of a person being brain dead and yet they're still alive. It's because this brainstem part actually controls the breathing and lets them still breathe, even though there's no brain function in the higher parts of their brain that does all of the thinking.